Hi, this is Ethan Tapper, the Chittenden County Forester, and I'm here at the Andrews Community Forest to give you another weekly update on the forest management project. And so we've been hampered a little bit by the weather. It's been wet, which means that we don't want to work because we're afraid we'll cause too much soil compaction, tree root damage, and stuff like that. So you have to wait till you can operate logging equipment in the woods without causing those impacts. One thing that I want to talk to you about today is the reason why we're doing this job in the late summer and early fall rather than doing it in the wintertime, because as many of you have probably heard, the wintertime's a great time to do logging. The soils are frozen, so you have less soil impacts. You can work in areas that are wetter. In a lot of cases, winter logging is a great way to go. However, there are situations when we might want to log when the ground isn't frozen and when there isn't snow on the ground. And in the Andrews Community Forest is a really good example of some of those cases. So first of all, I want to point out that this is an acorn year. So an acorn year, what we also might call a mast year. So mast is just a tree seed that wildlife like to eat. There's soft mast like cherries and apples, and there's hard mast like acorns and hickory nuts. Most of the species that make mast do it only periodically. And so they will hold off for a couple of years and then they'll produce a whole bunch of mast, and they'll actually do it all in conjunction with each other over a whole region. It's called synchrony. And basically the thought is that this serves an adaptive purpose in that if everybody were to produce acorns all the time, then the species who eat these acorns, which are many, which are turkeys and squirrels and deer, the populations of all those species would rise and they'd be able to eat pretty much all your acorns, and none of the acorns would become little oak trees. However, if you produce no acorns for a period of years, those populations of those animals will go down, and then you produce like an extra abundance of those acorns all at once, you'll overwhelm the ability of the predators of your seed to eat all those seeds, and so you'll be able to have some acorns that get through. Even with that strategy, so in the case of oak trees, there is a big acorn year about every 2 to 3 years. Even with that strategy, what we see is that 50% of the acorns perish on the tree, so they get parasitized, they get eaten by stuff, and it takes 2 years for an oak tree to make an acorn, so there's extra time for those acorns to get attacked by different things. And once the acorns fall off the tree, 98% of them get eaten by stuff, and everything likes to eat acorns, from turkeys to bears to squirrels and chipmunks. It's just this amazing source of food, and so once they get on the ground, 98% of them never get to sprout and become a little oak tree. And so a lot of the work that we're trying to do here is to specifically encourage red oak, which has a variety of different problems, which makes it really difficult to grow. And is a species that does really well on a site like this at the Andrews Community Forest. So this is what we're doing. The first thing that we're doing is trying to create a little soil scarification, and this is also a benefit to another species that we really want to encourage, white pine. What soil scarification is basically just scuffing up the top inches of soil. As you can see behind me, the leaf litter has been sort of scraped off these areas just by equipment running on it and trees being dragged over it, which is actually beautiful. It's exactly what we want. And exposed what we call mineral soil. So in areas that have been scarified, white pine and red oak tend to be more successful. The other thing that we're trying to do is to bury acorns. Now on my own land in Bolton, I went out with a pointy stick after logging happened on my land and poked a hole in the ground and popped an acorn into it and planted it with my foot. I did that, for thousands of different acorns, but that may not be feasible for most people over a large area. And so what we're trying to do with this forest management project is to use the logging equipment to basically do that job for us. So as we're felling trees, acorns are on the ground, we're dragging trees over them, which is going to bury them. And we're also, the wheels of the logging equipment is going to bury them, and so we're really trying to just basically use all of the disturbance that we're generating by doing this forest management to do that job for us. Now, if acorns get buried in even an inch of soil, the amount of them that get to sprout once they're on the ground goes from about 2% to about 50%. So that's a huge benefit. The other thing that's a risk to our oak trees is deer browse. So we know that in certain parts of the state, we have an overabundance of deer on the landscape, and what that means is that deer will eat a lot of little seedlings of the tree species that we want to grow. In particularly, they really like to eat red oak, and they don't like to eat another species that we have here, American beech. As a result, we have tons of beech in the understory of this forest and very little oak. And so what we want to do is, at the same time that we're trying to bury these acorns and we're trying to scarify soils, which will make them more likely to sprout, we also want to protect them so that once they sprout, they don't get browsed by deer. And the way that we're doing that is, as I alluded to in the last video, telling the logger specifically to, when he cuts the top off a tree, cuts branches off the trees, to leave them high and messy. And that will, as those acorns are able to germinate and sprout underneath that brush, it'll protect them physically from deer being able to browse them.